All right, and we are on air. Welcome to this week's Hangops. We're going to start by talking about the DevOps Enterprise Summit. I think that's what the F stands for in does. Um, I didn't personally attend, but Byron Miller is here to tell us all about it, and I'm going to poke fun at him and ask questions about the really neat, like all the random images that came back from it.
The DevOps Summit happened in San Francisco, and it was actually a great event. Lots of big companies there: GE, Nationwide, Disney, ESPN, government. Some of the best talks were actually the guys from the government. CTO, who's trying to do DevOps for the Homeland Security Immigration Office. He had a great story. Excuse me. And how to do DevOps with bureaucracy was a very interesting topic. The conference itself was sold out. Lots of good participation, lots of good themes. So if you need use cases to take back to your bosses, I highly recommend watching out for the videos when they get released. And I think it's within a week they'll be on YouTube, and the slides should be up in 3 days. I think is what I heard.
Yeah, it was that's awesome, and it's funny that you say that because there was someone recently was talking about like on I want to say DevOps Cafe. I don't remember who it was. Oh, it was I think Gene Kim was interviewing, and he was interviewing John and
Damon.
Damon. Yeah, thank you. And Damon makes the comment, you don't have DevOps problems if you've got a team of 20, because if you can just walk in a room and change your direction, you probably don't have a DevOps problem. So to hear it like in these large organizations is kind of awesome.
Yeah, and I mean, you heard from people that were dealing with budgets of $250 million a year on just a few projects. So the scales is up to 800 people in some of these agile groups, and so it was interesting hearing those stories. And one theme I think I even wrote about a blog about this morning was in the enterprise realm, it's definitely kind of almost agile first and then DevOps. So it's kind of interesting seeing how big corporations are trying to move in, and how they vision how they can go from A to B. But they're doing some interesting stuff. But the famous two questions that came from everybody that spoke and everybody that was there is, how do you deal with user acceptance testing? Because it's all manual. You can't automate some of the testing when you're validating data in your system of records and things like that very easily. So that was a huge question. And then, how do you audit? How do you get this past your audit team and work through those issues? So there was lots of discussion around that, but I think next year they can have a whole day just talking about audit, just with every question people are asking.
That's awesome. And like the couple of people that I've talked with that have nailed the auditing discussion, where essentially they explain to their auditor, get their auditors to understand like what the chef or the puppet code does, and not so much what it does, but basically that how it fits into the process.
Yeah.
They've told me that basically it takes them a little while to train their auditors, but once they train their auditors, they're like, no, really, just do it this way because this is so much easier.
Right, and that was one thing. We had a session, ask an auditor kind of thing, where we tried to steer people in that direction, because there's a lot of learned helplessness about, this is the way we've done it. We're kind of trained not to work with our auditors. So we just had to reiterate the simple message that the auditors are supposed to be a partner. I mean, they're there to help you out. And if you can get them in through your CI pipeline, Puppet, configuration management, and the tools, and show how all that's automated and there's no human interaction, but the audit records are there, they love it. So just get those people involved.
I just want to take a quick step back, because we mentioned acceptance tests, and that they had to be manual. Did I miss? Did you say that there was some talk around automating the acceptance tests, or did we leave it off at the statement that they were just manual?
It was everybody was recognizing that those tests set their takt time on their all of their agile projects, their scrums, or whatever whatever organization they chose to do the work, that it always came, regardless if it's internally developed or a COTS application. They couldn't figure out the user acceptance testing, kind of surface testing. They had different language for describing it, but they're flying through unit testing. I'm pretty impressed to see some of these companies and their depth of knowledge in that part. But when it actually becomes a product that you're trying to deliver and pass it through for compliance, security, those kind of things where you have human eyeballs on it, they just, you know.
Yeah, I mean, because especially the security side of things, that always tends to be the hardest thing to automate. But that is one of the, I think that's probably one of the most important parts to automate as part of your build pipeline. And there are acceptance testing frameworks out there for doing that kind of thing. So.
And I think some of it's the complexity of the app. Like a big one that I've worked on and others were working on was Oracle ERP, which has a forms component, which isn't, you can't use a WebDriver to kind of do that. So you have to use like Oracle Application Testing Suite or Cisco, or I don't know who owns LoadRunner now, HP, Mercury Interactive LoadRunner, those kind of tools, where you can try and have your business analyst record those sessions and play them back, but it's not very pipeline friendly. It's more, you adopt that tool or you adopt the whole pipeline around that tool. I think there's a huge market for someone to come in and put that in with Jenkins and, or any type of common CI/CD delivery tool and simplify that. It would be awesome. Big bucks for someone who could figure that out.
Yeah, or if there's enough market pressure pushing back on the vendors of those large systems that aren't easy to test.
Yeah.
Build.
If someone's going to replace it. Yeah.
But and that usually requires significant market pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oracle Form. I feel like you mentioned Oracle Forms, and I just like, as I heard that, like I flashed back, and good luck, Godspeed to whoever. Like, if you are testing that and making that experience awesome, or coming up with ways to make that better, like you are doing amazing work, and keep doing it, because ain't no one from Oracle gonna fix that for you, because they're just gonna tell you, well, you should upgrade to our latest web.
Yeah. Come to the Oracle Cloud.
The cloud. So, okay, I've got to say, one of the things that was my favorite of watching watching the feed, or watching the conference from my feed, was really the pictures. So I'm going to share one of the ones that we saw really frequently. If I can find the right button. Where did it go? The hardest part about Windows is losing Windows. Just saying. No, like the window. Yeah, I give up. You get it, I hope. I'm waiting for someone to tell me that I should be using a tiled.
We saw it. There we go.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna force it there. So this is one that was tweeted pretty heavily. Oh, present to everyone.
Yep.
There we go. The buttons, how do they work? But yeah, so this was an interesting, a picture of this got retweeted a bunch of times. Like, I saw different variants of it. It's kind of interesting, huh? Not sure. I agree with it, but like, I don't know. It's.
You can probably all identify, the director of no, and the director of rigidity in your organization.
Yeah, and to be honest, that there was a variant of that slide on almost every speaker deck of some sort. And it was spoken of so much that many people even said, I can't even say DevOps at work, so they had to call it something else to actually get it past these people, because they're conditioned to say no so well that they're listening for buzzwords, and it's just a response that they have.
I have been saying for years, if all you're gonna say is no, like, you're gonna have no ops soon, because we're just going to go put it on the pro card and expense that.
Yep. And that was another enterprises are recognizing that. I was blown away at how deep some of these companies are doing it, but I think they recognized that it opened up a new competitive arena on people that they just 10 years ago I would have never seen some of these companies competing to get the talent they are and try and raise the culture they are. And it was interesting seeing how they talked about it internally and sold it as a reason to work there and a reason why they're having success. It's cool to see that.
And I'm seeing that as well, like where I have colleagues that would have never considered working at certain places because they're just large organizations, but combined with the our hair isn't on fire every week,
Yeah.
um, and the hey, we're actually going to do neat and interesting things, but we're going to have reasonable timelines to do it in.
Yeah.
Um, that's winning a lot of hearts and minds, especially like it's interesting. I'm finding as our industry gets, how do I say this nicely? As our industry gets older, and there are more of us, like, or at least the crowd that I've grown up with, we're getting older and having
Yeah.
kids and doing that stuff. Like, yeah, it's really cool that you've got, um, free candy and free soda and free beer in the office. And don't get me wrong, I love all those things. But what I really want at the office, if I'm going to an office, is free daycare.
Yeah. For free time after 6, you can get home, you're done.
That's not a thing. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Another thing that I just found completely hilarious, and some of the best talks evolved around it, was almost everybody that you really loved listening to was basically saying, "I'm going to get fired for this." They're talking openly, but they know that's part of the culture. But they're just, people are crossing boundaries they never would have crossed before, and it was you couldn't help but smile and nod as people are up there, telling you about the guts of insurance companies and banks, and realizing that, where is the line? Where is that new line being drawn? And that sharing is important.
Exactly, and I'm right there with you. Like, in fact, it's been interesting being at Chef. Like, I owe people a blog post about this, but like the number of times I've done things that I should have gotten fired for, or at least like would have gotten me fired at other places. Um, like, and that's true, right? Like, it's not that things I should have gotten fired for, but rather like things that would have gotten me fired at other places, or at least gotten me disciplined.
Yeah.
Have resulted in, hey, awesome job, man. You should do that. That's awesome.
Yep.
Perfect example, going and randomly having polo shirts made. Where it's like, yeah, I did have the company logo digitized, and yes, I had it put on a polo shirt without marketing's permission. And, it's a thing. And it's funny to watch and see some of these large enterprises where they're like, yeah, I thought I was going to get fired, and instead, like, I'm now in charge of groups. Like, how did that happen?
Yep, there's lots of discussion on that. Lots of discussion saying you have our full support, and management running as far as ways they could for a while until they saw it work. So, I mean, it was lots of good stories to get people thinking of how they can do it in the strangest and most complex environments. So that was a big takeout from the summit.
Okay, so I'm going to show another picture, another image. It's one that I actually don't like at all, but it had a lot. There were a lot of tweets about it. Okay, where's the screen share button? I'm getting this down, guys. And present to everyone. Okay, so you should all be able to see it now.
Yes, be the automator, not the automated.
Yeah, like, I kind of didn't like this. Like, I saw it and I'm like, I don't know. How do you address this, right? Like, it's not it,
That
it
did It
yeah,
did cause, like, you could hear people mumbling under their breath that there was, I think even a couple of people tweeted, there's people talking about losing their jobs. They're basically automating themselves out of the jobs, which, I don't think I was in where this slide was displayed, but I mean, it's a common question. I think there was lots of discussion about how to break out what this slide really means to different people, and I think you could have a whole show about that. Some people in enterprises are at the end of their learning curve. They're 10 years away from retirement, and the DevOps thing is all shiny and new, and it's great, but can they keep up with, the workflow demand? And, is that slide the best way to say do or die? I think in enterprise there's a lot more middle ground than, in a highly competitive startup where it is do or die. So I wouldn't run around showing that slide off, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but you did see it. You heard the discussions.
Well, and it's funny to me, like, I always love, well, this is dead or that's dead, and it's like, so let's go talk to those people that I know that run COBOL. And, you know, COBOL's still kind of a thing.
Yep.
There's still mainframes running. In fact, I am in, I'm going to say rural California, if you will, and I could get in my car right now, and I could go convince someone to let me into a room that has a mainframe sitting there, and I wouldn't try very hard. Like, and I'm willing to bet if I actually went into LA, there's probably more mainframes there than anybody wants to admit to.
Yeah.
They're not going away. They're just, the demand for those positions is slow. I loved the statement, and I want to say it was James Turnbull was talking about it, or not. I'm sorry, not James Turnbull. Nigel Kirsten was talking about it on the Ship Show podcast. They were doing a recap from PuppetConf, and one of the things that was interesting. Okay, so a little bit of my background. I don't honestly believe that you can automate yourself out of a job, and if you automate yourself out of a job, you totally should go find the job that you just automated yourself into, because guess what? If you are at a point where you are actually able to automate yourself out of a job, you're doing something right. Like,
yeah,
I know that sounds crazy to most people. But
it's funny. There was a story actually about that a couple weeks back on the Food Fight show, and someone was saying, yeah, going and I'm talking about configuration management at this company, and one of the concerns is we're going to lose jobs, and he said almost everywhere I've been, it's not a concern. There's always other interesting stuff to do. There's new projects. There's other stuff you can get into. Until he got to one company where their policy was for every 4 servers they hire a sysadmin whose responsibility was those 4 servers. And
okay, so
that company would lose jobs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're recounting the same story, although I could have sworn it was on the Ship Show podcast. But while we're at a quick stopping point, we've got a couple people that joined us.
Before we move on from that last point, there was a comment on Twitter from Jennifer Davis, and she said, in relation to the slide, we shouldn't really attack roles or say particular roles are dying, but particular tasks that are associated with those roles that might be, or that should be on the chopping block. And I'm paraphrasing her comments there, so she can take it up with me if if I misquoted her there. But
and I would agree with that. You're very much right. Like a lot of those tasks are going away, but I don't know that. I think even then it's the frequency in which those tasks go away, right? Like we automate a lot of these things, but you still have to know in a lot of cases how they work underneath, and you occasionally find yourself having to run them and debug them because
they'll break and you got to know how to fix it. That's the thing. You can't build a system that you don't understand in the end because you got rid of everybody that built it or understood it to begin with.
Just before we get going too far, Dan and Ben, welcome to HangOps.
Hey, how's it going?
Did either of you guys make it out to the DevOps Enterprise Summit?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
I've got a standing policy of not flying across an ocean if I can avoid it. So
that seems reasonable. I have the same basic standing policy, which, I
might have to implement that policy.
Mine is just a matter of, like, you go for, 3 days, plus you add 2 days of travel, that's gone for a week, and leaving my wife with a 2-year-old, or I'm sorry, not a 2-year-old, a 16-month-year-old and a 5-month-old, or 5-year-old rather, you end up in this state. It's like, that's not a nice thing to do as a dad. So I try and avoid being gone for more than 3 days at a time.
And the 3-day conferences are just brutal. The 3rd day, everyone's got conference fatigue.
And I'm the crazy person that always... So I generally, when I'm conferencing, it's either in San Francisco or Seattle. So I generally fly the late night flight home. Like I'll bail and get to SFO and fly the 9 o'clock home, and
Yep.
then just like hard white knuckle it home from LAX.
I suppose if you have the option to do that, it works out well. But for me, it's almost the opposite. If I'm going to conferences, in North America, especially on the West Coast, in San Francisco, Portland, something like that, then I can't bother even going for less than a work week, right? I'm not gonna, have a 17-hour flight plan to go to a 2-day conference. That doesn't make sense at all, right? So. Yeah, so if it's like OzCon, for example, that's like, okay, that's enough because there's stuff happening before and after, and I can go for 2 weeks and it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But for something like a DevOps Days or even a Monitorama, although I did go to the one in Boston and didn't regret it, it's just way, way, way too far to go for 2 days.
I can definitely understand that.
Where are you coming from?
I live in Paris.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Not Paris, Texas, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Or Paris, California, for that matter.
Or
I
Paris,
completely picked out
Ontario.
my
Or,
accent.
yeah.
So, kind of getting back to just some of the more interesting things, it is funny, Byron, you make that point of there were a lot of org charts. Like as I'm like glancing through the photos from the conference, like lots of people shot pictures of org charts. Do you think that is just the nature of like enterprise discussions, or was it helpful to understand that? Like, what types of discussions did you find were happening around that?
It definitely reinforces the corporate culture. I didn't see any variance from that. People, almost one that spoke was like the Trojan horse that made something work in the organization. That then got promoted to the top of that chart to make it happen on a broader scale. And it was interesting hearing those stories because a lot of people did put everything on the line. They completely stepped out of their zone. There was even people that had just read about little things on the internet, not even knowing what the DevOps was or what Agile was, but completely embraced it, went out and got training, struggled through it, and rose to the challenge and succeeded ultimately. So it championed both the mainstay of this is what you struggle against, but it also showed how a lot of normal people moved up and did some amazing things, and that's what I liked about it. So it covered both. There's definitely a top-down organization that Gene was trying to target. He did bring in Gartner and Forrester and things like that to fill the people who make the Magic Quadrants and those kind of stories. But they did a good job of not making that the main focus and showing how just people of at all levels can go and make this happen.
Makes
Well, I
sense.
think it's really good that something like that's happening because what are we all doing if not attempting to rise the corporate ladder to become like director of DevOps? That's obvious. That's my career goal. I don't know about you guys, but maybe some sort of like VP of Dev and Ops together. That to me would be ideal. Hopefully, I would be able to negotiate some sort of super, super sweet contract where once I'm totally screwed up, I would get an enormous severance package. I think that's really what we should be concentrating on.
And for organizations, it's
enormous severance packages.
Yeah. For organizations, it's really Agile, DevOps, auditor, security. That was another thing. The discussion is definitely a lot bigger than when you go to DevOps Days and you got your hardcore operations and your hardcore devs and people that cross those boundaries. But this was very much about people trying to solve their risk and compliance pipeline in the very same way they're solving their dev and ops, and that was cool. Getting that discussion going, seeing what some people do, and seeing there's huge opportunity there that some smaller companies are able to come in and target.
So this is gonna sound almost I don't know. It's not gonna sound the greatest, but like one of the big things we've seen that's been coupled with the movement towards DevOps has been, I'm going to use the marketing term, the movement towards cloud and software as a service, infrastructure as a service. Did you find that there was more discussion on, no, really, you don't actually need to maintain your own data center. No, it actually does make sense to farm some of these things out. And then, what's the reverse discussion, right? Of, well, if you're Walmart, pulling a off-the-shelf product to track your inventory probably isn't the right thing to do.
Right. There was discussions about both. It seemed like everybody knew the cloud train already came and went, and there was no longer a battle of whether it's viable or not. So that it was interesting that discussion didn't really happen. It wasn't, should or shouldn't we do it? It was more, all right, we have risk, cost analysis, audit requirements. There are certain things that require us to do the cloud internally or public cloud. And then I think there's also a lot of vendors that are filling that void, so they can meet in the middle and kind of have the best of both, where you have APIs and things that they can grow internally to fit whatever controls and compliance they have, and then whatever you can move to the public cloud, they're doing it. I mean, I didn't see any of the contention there, people questioning it, and even the Department of Homeland Security immigration guy was saying they run on Amazon public cloud and private, the deal that they did. So, and he didn't beat around the bush at all, talking about the value he got out of that.
That's interesting, because I still hear, as I talk to folks, that that security concern or this concern or that concern, and I guess I just don't understand it still. But
I think most of them put a partition in there. So if the system of record, you probably won't see much of that on the public cloud, Oracle Financials, and things like that. But there was discussions of it. Like a lot of people under their slide was, how do I do something like this with PeopleSoft? That was the one I saw the most. Is how do you DevOps or get agile with those style systems? And Oracle, Microsoft is doing some PeopleSoft on Azure, I believe. So there's people pushing that, and it's going to be a slow process on that side, I think. But the companies are definitely recognizing where the value is.
I just want to jump right in there quick, and I'm going to throw out a topic, and you say whatever comes to mind first. Is Microsoft getting cool again? Like, is that happening?
Yes.
Is that a thing that's happening right now?
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Right?
one thing that actually just happened, like in the last couple weeks, is Microsoft OpenTech is actually less of a thing now. They're realizing that, hey, the stuff that we do should actually, a lot of it, or we should just have the knowledge in house in the different org, in different parts of the org, how to work with open source projects and how to open source our own stuff. That a lot of the MS OpenTech folks are now just actually embedded in different parts, like the Windows Server team and stuff like that. So like OneGet, the packaging framework that they're working on, or the packaging abstraction that they're working on, that was being coordinated through MS OpenTech, that's been pulled back into Windows Server division.
Yeah.
And like ASP.NET, that's all open source now. They take community contributions and do stuff like that. And Azure is doing a bunch of offering a bunch of cool services. You can get Elasticsearch, you can get Redis, and
But even at that conference, Jeffrey Snover was there. He's the PowerShell dude, and he was talking to everybody, big smile on his face, very approachable. Jessica was there. It was great. And people were talking to him. It was nice seeing the community coming back.
What's kind of interesting about Microsoft, I think, is that for years they were the company that could do no wrong. You don't like it, screw you. We're Microsoft. We kick ass. And there's been a generational turnover.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the people have gone over there, kind of know we're Microsoft. We suck. Everyone hates us. We're the evil empire. We're the bad guys. And there's a real kind of desire to kind of turn that around, right? They have this. We're the underdog. We have to fight. And I think it's a great thing, because Microsoft has always been a weird company in that they have always had some of the smartest people in the industry. And if you guys have ever hung out with Microsoft employees over the last 20 years, it's weird when you hang out with so many really smart people and you scratch your head wondering, why do you build such crap? Why can you continue to work at a company that makes trash? I mean, you guys are smart. You guys know what you're doing. What's up? It's good to see it turn around.
Yeah, definitely. And a large part of it is their emphasis on selling services and selling Azure. And realizing, okay, our traditional approach to this stuff isn't going to work in this type of delivery mechanism, and we need to, if we're going to play in the cloud space, if we're going to play in the DevOps space, we need to change some stuff up. And part of that was the generational thing you mentioned. Like now there's actually people who've in the organization who've kind of risen through the ranks who believed that stuff to begin with and just haven't been able to break through the management crust. Guys like Scott Gu, who leads up Server and Tools now, and guys like Snover, who went from inventing PowerShell to now is chief architect for System Center and Windows Server, and those guys kind of pushing the different stories. So it's been real cool to watch.
But even the community's been embracing it. Like Chef hired Steven. I mean, you're seeing open source communities start to come back pretty quick and rise to the challenge and opportunities that they've been afforded with Microsoft making this switch. And then of course the huge Docker announcement last week. And it's cool.
Yeah, I'll be at TechEd Europe next week and in Barcelona, and that's going to be one of the sites of one of the Docker World Hack Day events. They'll be co-located at TechEd, and yeah, it should be fun stuff.
Yeah.
The best part about Microsoft's reemergence as a reasonable entity is that it's left, I think, like a power vacuum for another company to become the new evil empire.
Oracle.
Right? And I'm kind of curious who it's going to be exactly, right? There's a lot of contenders right now.
Well, and
I thought he said the new evil empire.
Oh yes.
Well, and it's funny that you say that because I think as we're seeing a lot of the growth, we're stopping, like these large tech companies as a whole are starting to, their existence is starting to not be as big of a thing, and I think that we're gonna find smaller things to hate on for a while. Like currently, I think the thing we're hating on right now is Systemd, is our current where all the rage seems to be focused these days. But I mean, at the end of the day, for me, the biggest thing is we have to make sure that we are, how do I say this nicely, not doing that. Like, because if you rage against the company, you're eventually going to be wrong, right? Like, we can all come up with reasons. In fact, frankly, if you can't come up with a reason why you shouldn't run the software, you probably don't have enough operational experience to say that you are good at running the software. Because there's not a single piece of software that I can say it's just phenomenal. Everything about it is perfect. Like everything has places for improvement.
Yeah.
Except
for maybe DJB stuff, but that's a side tangent.
You totally beat me to it. I was like, but what about DJB DNS?
I think the idea of one big company that's all evil all the time, that we hate all the time, is sort of gone. And I think a lot of that also has to do with the fact that, the news cycle is so much shorter, right? When Microsoft was the love of hate, you found out what Microsoft was doing once a month in a magazine.
Yeah.
Now the news changes every day. I mean, on Hacker News, there's the good guy, the bad guy on an hourly basis, and as companies that we rely on and that we trust make mistakes or do things we don't like, they're going to fall under the hammer of hatred, right? CoreOS is one of those companies that they don't have to do much before people are going to not like them, and then they'll like them the next day. Docker. I think that there's a couple companies we want to make sure that we don't end up on the side of hating, and I think the one company that has the power to make us all wag the finger would be Intel. They're the one company that everyone relies on. But otherwise, the days of Microsoft controlling our data centers against our will is over.
Well, and you make an interesting point with Intel, right? Because it's still that short, that really long iteration cycle. Like if they go, I don't know, end up with a floating point error in their chip that, as a result, we find out years later that all of the mathematical processing that was done to build, a couple bridges is wrong, and we didn't find out until like we were halfway building the bridge. Like there's not much that can be done about it. And yes, we may hate them for a little bit, but they're still the largest chip manufacturer in the world.
I think even Intel's kind of been forced to play like Microsoft, where they kind of avoided the low power, slowed it down with some cheesy products to fill niche markets. But nowadays you can get a i7 that's a few watts running in a tablet like the Surface Pro 3 and other tablets like that. You never would have guessed 2 years ago that ARM would almost be non-existent, in the prosumer tablet market. So it's interesting seeing Intel recognizing they can't use their dominant power to control the products anymore.
Yeah, I think Intel's very aware of who they are, what they are, and their size, and they've been pretty good at playing the game.
Yeah.
I mean, they're on both sides of the fence these days. Sort of in just about every market. And they're smart guys. They know what they're doing. And they really have done a lot to turn around the company, right? It was only a couple of years ago that Intel was the company that you went to when you were contemplating suicide, but not quite sure. We'll push you over the edge, no problem.
I have my favorite Intel story, actually. I'm going to sidetrack because I've been getting into the bourbon. And I was in Portland for OzCon in 2013. And I had been walking around all night and just bar hopping, and I didn't realize how long it was going to take to walk back downtown. So I'm walking kind of through this sketchy neighborhood, and there's like a whole bunch of overpasses, and I'm hoping there's going to be like a bus or something. And there's a bunch of people sitting under the overpass drinking, and I'm kind of sauced, so I wander over. I'm like, hey, what's going on? Where's the bus at? And they're like, we don't know where the bus is at, but we got booze, so natural fit. Sit down. Pass the ball around, have some drinks to them. There was like this whacked out chick on the one side of me and this other dude who turns to me ever so slowly, looks me straight in the eyes and goes, do you want to know anything about chip fab? Because I can tell you everything about chip fab. Intel.
Nice.
That is random but hilarious all at the same time.
I haven't had that from AMD yet. I think that people don't wear their AMD badges when they walk around town anymore.
And it's interesting. Just one of the things that I've kind of missed. I got out of the high performance computing market a while ago, and I do miss hearing about the neat like GPU and all the things that we don't get to play with because we don't like buy hardware anymore. Which I'm going to continue to say, like, if anyone wants to give me a data center tour, I would love to do that because I miss the sound of the data center. But there's something to be said for that leading edge, right? You've got a cluster that's running the it was called the Knight's Corner chip. I don't even know what it's called now, but these coprocessors to do all sorts of crazy mathematical things, GPUs to do all sorts of crazy things, and I don't feel like we hear as much about those kinds of things because we're doing so much just general computing in the cloud that the supercomputing market doesn't hit the normal market as much. Or am I just crazy?
No, you definitely see that. It's kind of big in the Bitcoin mining industry. I was a huge fan of the Radeon cards because of the low power, high throughput on the type of coins that they were doing, and that might be one of the few reasons that AMD is even still around was Bitcoin mining and that compute industry saved their skin because they announced some of their products and they had a forecast of what they'd cost a few years later, and they were almost 30 to 40% higher than what they'd forecasted just because demand was higher. So it's there's definitely a compute market out there, but I'm not sure what segment's using it. But the one I've seen has been Bitcoin, which is kind of interesting.
And Bitcoin, yeah, that's a weird industry unto itself, or part of our industry, I guess.
Right.
Bitcoin and bits or hashes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that actually presents a really interesting question. Like, when people ask you what industry you work in, like, I am now working for a vendor, so I am now obviously in the IT space, but like, I've been a sysadmin my entire life, but depending on where I happen to be, what job I happen to be, even, I was in education, but depending on what part of the educational stack I was in, changed what I worked on. Do you guys consider yourselves part of the tech industry, or do you consider yourselves part of the industry that your company exists in? Although, as I'm looking across, I know, like, Byron, you may be the only one of us that doesn't technically work for a vendor.
Yeah. Even when I did work for vendors, I did some stints at Oracle. And I got out while I could, but I guess I would say I work for the industry just because I'm participating in it. And when I talk about things, I used to not be able to talk about where I worked, and so it was, hey, this is the cool things I'd like to talk about doing, but here's how it might help you. So even at the DevOps Enterprise Summit, there was a lot of people that talked about it as an industry because they had to do blackouts on the videos because they couldn't get their organization to approve it for live streaming until they viewed it and blessed it. So I'd say there's a lot of people that would say they work for the industry versus a particular place.
Prior to where I am now, I would associate with the industry that my company's primary business was in. It's like back when I worked for the police department, I was in the law enforcement space. When I had that Stack Exchange, that was the job market with the career side. I don't know what industry I'd throw that under, but
makes sense.
It's kind of where I would see myself working.
I actually have the opposite. I definitely identify with my employer, which, for the record, is Mozilla. I don't know if working for a company that makes web browsers is a very big industry. And certainly we're the only nonprofit, I'm pretty sure, making a web browser. So am I in the nonprofit space? Am I in the tech space? We do educational initiatives. We actually spend a lot of money doing educational outreach around the world. So are we an educational company? We're in the political sphere, right? So are we a political company? It's difficult to say, and so in that respect, it's easier for me to just go, I work for Mozilla.
Yeah, I work for HomeAway, and we want you to have awesome vacations, but what I do, I don't have anything that deals with the vacations, as far as convincing you to use us to list your house or find a house, but otherwise, I'm sitting and living and breathing technology and helping the company discover how to use it to achieve their goals, and I'm proud of, working here has been amazing, but I guess I could say, I got birdhouses behind me. We do vacations, and go.
Yeah.
But, it definitely feels more industry. How I relate to other people and talk about it.
I'll troll you a little bit, Bryant, but that was very siloed of you. Because yeah.
I'd say it's a fluid thing, right? If you're at a vendor, you have a certain bent. If you're at a company, particularly like Chef, that's also not just a vendor, but also almost a factory of culture, or an Etsy or something like that, or Mozilla, there's a certain kind of level that you go to. But at the end of the day, all of us are passionate about connecting business and people with technology. And that's fluid, right? I could go and work for Home Depot. I could work at Joint. I could work at Amazon. I could work at Mozilla. I could work at Chef. I could work at, Bob's Hardware. Fundamentally, I'm going to be doing the same thing, and I'm going to be, enabling business to connect with its customers and its users and meet its business objectives. So, I mean, it ebbs and flows, right? I mean, right now there's a lot of money for a lot of the vendors, and so a lot of us tend to work for the vendors. In a couple of, this bubble may kind of burst at some point, and a lot of us will scatter off into more kind of traditional brick and mortar businesses.
That makes sense. And yeah, I would tend to agree that we will definitely move around where the money is, but it's interesting just to think about how we identify it. And I think the more I think about it, I rarely get asked the industry question except on surveys. So I guess maybe that isn't really a super valid question at the end of the day.
Well,
Can I segue on that?
It generated a little discussion.
Yeah.
Those stupid forms. They always say, "What industry do you work in?" Do you guys feel like there's never an appropriate segment for you?
Oh, there never is.
I'm like always other. I'm like, well,
There hasn't been since I worked in public safety, and then there was always a category, but since then, yeah.
Like,
I'm right there
is
with you.
internet service not a big enough segment to like get on the list?
I don't know. There's not enough internet out there. You're just screwed.
I know. Well, don't worry. It's catching on. It's coming to a city near you.
That's in the next release of the form.
Yeah.
It's when that category is coming.
It's
been in development for the last 17 years.
Yeah.
I'm now tempted to go find there's those tracking pixel companies. I forget their names, but there's one of them that's pretty big, and you can actually go to one of their sites and it'll tell you what it thinks about you, and it would be interesting to find out what industry it thinks I'm in. Which that's it. Like that's interesting. The backgrounds that we come from, right? Where it's been interesting having some conversations over the past couple of days of. It's not so much even the industry you come from, it's the size of the organizations frequently matter. So if you've never been in a company larger than like 200 people, you have a very different view, and that was like the large company you worked for. That's a very different perspective than someone that's worked for an organization that is multinational and has tens of thousands of employees, or even in between with lots of bureaucracy.
That's definitely valid, and there wasn't a short supply of companies that had 120,000 plus employees at the conference. And that brings a different perspective too, because it's hard to shine when you're in a company and you're one of 120,000. And a lot of the people in the industry like being the guy that saves something or did the cool thing, and it's hard to feel rewarded in a big faceless organization at times. But I did see a lot of companies making the commitment that, this is a lot of work, this is paradigm shifting, the things you guys are talking about are awesome, and we'll help make you feel rewarded, come join us. And, there was that discussion, which was pretty cool. I certainly didn't feel that at work when I worked for MBNA, 7-8 years ago, but talking to them now, it's like, that's not the same company that existed even that long ago, and it's cool to see that shift.
I've always felt that there are definitely pros and cons to the big company, small company, right? The big company, you do kind of blend into the walls a little bit more, and that can be a bit of a bummer from time to time. But it also gives you a position to spend a lot more time playing with new technology, really digging in and trying stuff out, because the ship is stable, right? Some of us working at smaller companies with smaller crews where things we're fighting the fires all the time. You constantly have that wish list of, oh man, I'd love to check out that new technology, and I don't get a chance to. So I mean, it always seems like there's a good position to kind of go with the smaller companies where you get very exciting, go to a bigger company for a while, chill out for a bit, catch up on all the books you've wanted to read, and flip back and forth. I think there's a place for both. It's just seasons, right? Different times for different parts of your career.
Yep.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where I'm at. It is always funny though. You talk to people occasionally, and it's like you've never not been in a large organization, so you have no idea what it's like to work with, be on an ops team of 1 or 2, or on the flip side, you've never been, in a company larger than 50 people. So what you view as this horrible thing is just kind of normal in those organizations.
Yeah.
I really resonate with that comment about it being like different seasons. You know, when I was younger, I would just, I was kind of flip from job to job, whatever was interesting. It didn't really matter because the future was whatever. Now I've got a kid, right? I've got to think about the long term. I've got to think about, health plans. I got to think about child care, et cetera, et cetera. And the season I'm going into now is, okay, some stability, a reasonably large paycheck, et cetera, et cetera. And so in some ways, I find myself missing the dynamism and the high speed and that weird like adrenaline-fueled stress of working for a startup. But at the end of the day, I work for 8 hours and I come home and I leave it at my desk. I come home and I just enjoy my evening and like hang out with my kid and my wife. And there's something to be said for that at this stage during this season. But
it's not even necessarily the size of the organization that it's more the culture of the organization and the type and how they handle work, because I've been in larger organizations where it's been high pressure, go all the time, the continual death march that never lets up, and that's the smaller organizations that have a higher velocity have actually been more relaxed for me. So yeah.
Yeah, particularly with large organizations, people need to think about the fact that within a large organization, you have a lot of different small groups, and the culture of those groups tends to be very distinct because you have to differentiate yourself from the big monolith, So it does bother me sometimes when people look at large corporations and try to make these blanket statements about what it's like to be there. Every team has their own sort of distinct subculture within the company, and yeah, some of them are grueling death marches that never end. Others are really laid back and have a good time. Some are very innovative. Some are happy to just do the job and go home. There's a lot of variety. So it's always dangerous to cast any kind of general blanket idea.
Yeah, it's like microclimates. For example, I live in Wisconsin, in southeastern Wisconsin, and we're generally like a zone 4, zone 5, which is a rating of how cold it gets. And so certain types of plants do real well, certain types don't. But within a particular yard, you could actually have little microclimates where it's either much warmer than or much colder than normal all the time. And so things that would normally not grow well might do well there. And you have the same thing in an organization. It's going to be influenced by the overall organizational culture, but you still have these little microclimates all around where you have that are influenced by the manager's personalities, the type of business unit that it is, and the overall just the people that are actually in that organization and in that part of the organization.
What's really neat actually right now is seeing some of the big companies that are really kind of really seriously taking technology and reaching out to the customers via the internet is a real differentiator. Like Nordstrom is a great example. I'm sure all of us know folks over at Nordstrom. They're doing some really cool stuff. They got some great people, and it's a little weird when first somebody learns about it, they're like, Nordstrom, cool? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Can I just pop in quick?
Yeah.
What's a Nordstrom?
Nordstrom's?
Yeah.
Like the big department store?
Yeah, huge department store here in the States.
Macy's, Saks Fifth Avenue, Nordstrom's.
Okay, cool.
Even to expand upon that, Nationwide was at the conference, and they were talking about doing DevOps on COBOL and mainframes and systems of record that support 120,000 people. And it was interesting hearing his story because I didn't know pet insurance was that big of a market, and actually you're doing DevOps around systems that maintain system of record for pet insurance and actuarial. It was whenever they published that, which I hope it gets published. I don't think he was blacked out. If you didn't see it live streamed, you got to check it out, and because it brings up that whole microclimate thing where you wouldn't think of. I doubt the whole insurance market is like that, but there's people within Nationwide making those little differences and building awesome teams to do cool stuff.
That is.
Would it be too bold to suggest that the microclimate that became the global climate is like AWS. I mean, that's an example of what started out as a small team in a completely orthogonal industry, basically creating a new industry.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you just described innovation.
Boom!
Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting to see how big that has grown. If you had told me what AWS was, what Joyent was, what any of those things were 5, 10 years ago, I would have told you, that's crazy. Everybody's going to run their own servers in-house, because why would you run it in the cloud? Now, as I sit at my desk and spin up instances without thinking about it, I look at people, why would you run hardware? Like, pay someone else to do that.
I still fall in the camp of running your own hardware, but that's just the environments I've been in where my comfort level is, and when I've looked at it, it just didn't make sense financially.
As long as you're collecting that data, that's really all that matters.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So we are just about out of time, and I wanted to share something that I talked about last week. I had showed a picture of a sticker I was having made. I finally got it. So, if I keep talking, you'll see it. Let me back up just a little bit. So Dave Shaw did some awesome shirts, but like getting the stickers sourced was a problem. So we got some stickers sourced. And if I get an address, I will send. If you DM me or email me your address, I will send you a couple.
And a self-addressed stamped envelope.
You know what? I will pay for the stamp, but if you got to get me your address, and I will drop you a couple stickers.
All right.
If you can DM a self-addressed stamped envelope, I will be very impressed.
I'll send you a Bitcoin.
I was going to say, that actually isn't all that hard, because you just like go to the USPS site or the FedEx site and print out the mailing label, or send the mailing label as a PDF.
Oh, looks like Jessica's just joining us.
Just as we're finishing up.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts, folks, before we call it a day?
So if anybody is going to be in Belgium on Monday and Tuesday, definitely come to DevOps Days in Ghent. It's officially sold out, but if you email me, I can get you a ticket. So if you're going to be in Ghent, definitely think about coming through, because it's going to be super, super dope.
That's awesome. All right, everyone, have a great day, and thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Have a great day. Bye.
See you.